Hey there, I'm Tammy Davis and want to thank you for joining me and watching out my videos. If you've just visited my YouTube channel for the first time, you'll see that I have never filed anything into any particular category. Maybe I should do that, so I'm taking responsibility for now for the way it appears, because I've had some people make comments about how it's often difficult to find something within my YouTube library. So please know that that is on my to-do list, and I hope to get to that fairly soon. That said, though, this particular video is in part due to the fact that I had a number of interesting conversations, and I've spent a great deal of time reflecting on what to say and potential responses and thought processes on your end, because, well, number one, that's the way my head works. I try to take into account everything that could potentially come up as a result of what I say, not because I want to defend, but because I want to offer a perspective and potentially an explanation and a deeper understanding of what I'm proposing, as opposed to other individuals who are also very passionate about health and wellness. So on that note, like I said, I've been involved with a number of conversations in the last day regarding different conditions altogether, yet at the same time, they're very representative of what I would consider to be autoimmune. And then what's even more interesting is I just recently completed a post on my website, pardon me, around the lines of addiction not being any different than heart disease or diabetes or arthritis and so on. Because even though we recognize dopamine, or for that matter, any mental health issue, it's no different than any physical health condition, because the chemistry is chemistry. If we think about it, it doesn't take a lot to recognize the fact that the brain is what controls the entire body. So to try to segment mental health as a weakness, bad decisions, and so forth is damaging. It's damaging to the individuals that we love. It's damaging to our communities because it actually holds people at arm's length. Furthermore, like I said, the chemistry is identical. So if you just stop and think about for a moment, as I mentioned, that the brain is what controls the body. So if there's a change in the way the brain is producing chemistry and using it, then it's going to affect us ultimately physically. Sometimes it affects us more mentally than it does physically. Sometimes it affects us both physically and mentally. So it just really depends on the individual genome. I was speaking with an Amish woman just yesterday and explained to her that, there's 7.5 plus billion people on the planet, which means there's 7.5 billion plus genomes, which means every single one of us is going to represent a health condition differently, even though it has the same name. Now, this isn't to complicate matters. This is just merely to make a point that it's very important to individualize the approach, which is the reason why I disagree with anyone coming out and saying this is how you deal with this condition, because it's not the same. It's just not the same. It can't be the same. Our genome is as different as our fingerprints. So on that note, a large portion of my conversations, like I said yesterday, involved autoimmune disorders, but even in relation to the blog post that I did, it was around dopamine primarily. And dopamine, to bottom line everything, is a signaling molecule. And it is regulated also, and I should say more importantly, influenced by estrogen. Estrogen is a neuromodulator as well. And so both of these chemicals have their predominantly known purposes in the body, dopamine being the motivation reward chemical, but we've also recognized that that's been around for over 500 million years. It exists throughout nature, in plants and in animals. And estrogen is also both in men and women. It's a very important hormone that has a lot more to do with than just bearing babies and regulating the menstrual cycle. As I mentioned just a second ago, it is considered a neuromodulator, and it also is a signaling molecule that will activate the immune system. Now, this is where it got really interesting for me yesterday because, again, I was working with and talking about a number of health conditions, but each one of them was related in the sense of estrogen was involved, and in both men and women. And there was a lot of other conditions that were happening as a result. And in our culture, what we tend to do is this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is a problem, and that's a problem, and over here's a problem. And we compartmentalize, we separate everything, when in fact it's all connected. And if this is the point that I'm trying to get at, that even though we have so many different varieties, opportunities to experience all these health conditions, the basic chemistry involved is the same. Now, you might go, well, then why can't we just treat it the same? Because the genome is different. Okay, so just because we're talking about chemicals doesn't exclude the genetic factors that are involved, and each one of those remains different. And again, this is in part why medications are not sufficient enough. I'm not saying that you should not use medications. What I'm saying is they're not sufficient. They are targeted for very specific gene activation and deactivation. Say that another way, they target gene activity. They will either turn it off or they will turn it on, or they will just modulate it and just kind of sustain it as it's supposed to be. So this is what medications do. We understand this through so many different types of research. You know, I've talked about before that we research a lot of plants. We do. 80% of our medications actually do result from the study of plant components on genes, not necessarily the human genome, but genes in general. Again, when I wrote about also is when you think about it, DNA is DNA. And the genes in the human body, we have the same genes in other animals. And so even though there are variations due to the DNA, they're still there. And so man has found a way to test this and produce something that eventually becomes beneficial to the human body. But like I said, it's not sustainable. It's a fix, it's a relief, and it requires balancing the system out. We are very big on organic these days. It's something that you can just go into a store and see, labels that have the word organic written on them. But if we actually look at the definition of organic, it's far more broader than just chemical free. And ideally, organic is just, we can talk about in our conversation kind of unfolding organically. It just kind of opens up and it grows. Okay, so that would be one form of organic. Organic also means to create harmony, a harmonious relationship, order, integration. And it's odd because in my mind, I could even see that in the place of disease or disorders, health or ill health, because essentially the body is working in an organic way. It's organically unfolding like a conversation. And even though we may judge it as out of balance or lacking harmony, in the realm of nature, it's not out of balance. It's not out of harmony. It's just unfolding organically. The challenge that we're running into is when we just go for the medication, and or for that matter, even if we're treating something naturally, which I consider all of this the conventional model, when we're going at it in a way that we're trying to target very specific symptoms, we are not coming at it in an organic manner. We're not allowing things to unfold organically. And when things don't happen like that, what do is we go to the next thing, or we add something else to try to to try to accentuate the results, to try to get to that bottom line result that we're actually seeking. I had a lady call me the other day that she went into a total flare-up with her psoriasis after I had kind of given her some things to use and given her some information, a lot of information to work with. And then she went ahead and took on some other things in addition to everything that we were doing, and over detoxed the body, which just then flew it into a flare. So she wanted to know her question to me was, what else can I do? And, what she was looking for was what other products can I go out and get, or what else can I add to my protocol and create the result that I'm seeking. And I actually told her to stop doing everything, give her body a break, because at that point she had done way too much. And so this is my encouragement to anyone watching this that's experiencing ongoing problems and you're trying ceaselessly to come up with the answer that serves your body. You actually may be working with your individual body based on the information that you're finding, and you're not getting to the results. So my words of encouragement are to stop, to back off, to actually give yourself permission, give your body a break, and give it an actual chance to recover. As I mentioned a little earlier, estrogen is considered a neuromodulatory chemical, a signaling molecule, if you will, that activates the immune reaction. And dopamine is a signaling molecule that initiates the stress response. And so what happens, which one does what? And in the world of stress being a protection mechanism, when dopamine initiates the stress response, it activates cortisol. Okay, we already know that to be our stress hormone. When this is an ongoing process, and given the world that we live in, it is because our bodies are consistently under pressure due to everything that we are exposed to, whether it be things we literally consume on purpose or things that we breathe, are exposed to just because we happen to be standing next to someone who's vaping or a car that goes by. We are exposed to endless amounts of chemicals. And so the body is under pressure. Therefore, there is an ongoing stress response. And I've talked about this before, but if you haven't heard me say it, the body cannot differentiate between a pollutant and a worry or a vicious animal or an attacker. Let's just say it that way. The body cannot differentiate, and to me, this is one of the greatest gifts that we've been given. Is we've been gifted awareness, the ability to recognize, oh wait a minute, this is what's going on, and have the ability to exercise some degree of stress relief. Now, in some cases, this is easier for some people than others. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I encourage the use of essential oils. You don't have to use them every day, especially if you find yourself getting results that you don't like, or you're finding yourself to a degree of discomfort, dis-ease, and so forth. That said, the idea here is to help the stress relief. One of the built-in mechanisms for stress relief is sleep. And I know a lot of us struggle with sleep. So here again, we're back into estrogen. And once it activates the immune system, depending on your genome, you will experience some type of reaction because the body is on alert. So dopamine has signaled the stress response. As I mentioned, it cannot differentiate. So until we can get a handle on this and activate or actively pursue stress relief on a regular basis, deliberate stress relief, sorry for all the noise if you hear that. I chose to do this right now because the light was better and it seems to be a busy time. Anyway, so when we choose to actively pursue stress relief, we're doing ourselves a favor. However, until that point, and that we actually achieve that on a regular basis, because every time that we're faced with the world, we're activating the stress response. And as that occurs, several things happen physiologically. The digestive system is altered. I'm not going to say it breaks down, all right? I've actually wanting to change my language, because as I'm beginning to see this, everything is perfect in the realm of nature. It's all organic. It's all balanced. It's all it is all harmonious. We really would benefit to rethink the way we are looking at this. So the digestive system doesn't break down. The energy is redirected. The chemistry is redirected to protect us. Okay? So what happens in that? It means that the hormone system has changed, because we have excessive amounts of cortisol firing. So the hormonal system has changed. The system has been activated. We are now in defense mode. One of our defense mechanisms is oxidative stress. There's a big movement, as you know, to make sure that we include a lot of antioxidants into our daily life to eliminate this oxidative stress. And truthfully, yes, oxidative stress at high levels is harmful. It can make us sick. It is toxic, without question. However, that oxidative stress has a reason. There's a purpose to it, and it's a defense mechanism. It is actually the body, the system's way of trying to keep us protected. So maybe one of our shifts should be to begin to bless the fact that our body is actually acting in our favor. This is part of the reason why, if you've been around me for a while, you'll recognize that I've talked about dis-ease, disorder, discomfort as being a lack of ease, order, and comfort. Okay, that's how we can perceive it. At the same time, I also recognize it as a gift. It's an opportunity for us to partner with our system to actually work in harmony with nature, not just deliberately try to control it. Okay, and that goes back to what I was also talking about with regards to medication or just the conventional model. When we're constantly seeking to control symptoms, we are not working in harmony. We are trying to control. And yes, there are times where that is very beneficial and very much needed. We have to be able to balance the system out. We have to provide that. And when here, in this case, when I'm talking about balance, it's actually, think about the scales. Oddly enough, this is the time of Libra. And that's really all about balance. And so this is truthfully what I'm beginning to see is the two worlds actually can work together. And identifying estrogen as being very important. I've done other videos on histamine intolerance, and I've mentioned in those videos that when histamine goes up, estrogen goes up, and when estrogen goes up, yeast goes up. And this was a lot of information gathering from a lot of schools of thought. But since those videos, I've invested a lot of time and money into really uncovering the neuroscience behind all health issues, and really coming to understand the stress response as an added bonus, that we are wired for safety, and so therefore we have this oxidative stress that is elevated for our protection. But if it's ongoing, as I mentioned, if it's chronic, it becomes toxic. And so the inclusion of antioxidants is always a good idea. But what I've also come to understand is under the stress response, and what I do recognize about these signaling molecules is that they activate and deactivate various cells. And in that instance, that means the nutrients that we're consuming are either not, the macronutrients are not being broken down efficiently and being used, which will now activate even more of a stress response, or I should say an immune response. Furthermore, when certain cells are deactivated due to the body being in protection mode, we're not even getting the full benefit of the micronutrients. And so taking large amounts, macro dosing on nutraceuticals is really not to your advantage, and you actually might be overstressing your body even further. One more reason to give yourself permission to maybe not do something for one day, and or to juggle the way you do things. You don't have to take it so in such a regimented way. You can actually be in harmony with your system and kind of get a feel for, check in, what do I want to do today? I mean, we have all this guidance when it comes to working with our intuition, when it comes to relationship with others, when it comes to careers and developing businesses, and increasing our finances. I mean, there's a lot of mindful coaching out there, but where are we not doing that? Where are we misstepping this? And this is where I would come back and say, I've even encouraged people to, when we're going to eat something, to check in, what do I want? I've talked about that before. Do I want the apple? Do I want the cookie? No, I really, really want the cookie. Eat the cookie. That's what I say. Just eat the cookie. There's obviously something in that cookie that your body's asking for. To question that is to doubt, is to lack trust. Now, I understand, again, these are some of the objections that I hear when I think about doing things like this, is, maybe you have a quote unquote weakness with carbohydrates and sugar, and eating one cookie just leads to another. Okay, well, there's a large explanation that would warrant a conversation that I can share with you that I don't want to dive into right here, right now. But there again, if that is something that you recognize, that's a behavior that you, if that's a behavior that you are prone to doing, then, or engaging in, then use caution. I will say that. However, sugar, like caffeine, like alcohol, like cocaine, like cortisol, all activate and alter the structure of the brain, and more specifically, the area of the brain that's related to addiction. So if you feel like you are addicted to carbohydrates and sugar, there's a couple of reasons for that. And that would be, number one, their stress response is activated. Your dopamine has activated it, and cortisol has been found to alter the brain structure. So that said, that alone will propel you into some sort of addictive type of behavior. It may not be with alcohol and drugs. It could be with something else. But yet, nonetheless, cortisol is a culprit, just like caffeine and sugar. Okay? If carbohydrates and sugar are your enemy, then I would suggest that part of the reason is due to the fact that excessive levels of cortisol do inhibit the breakdown of glucose. And sugar, and the words sugar and carbohydrate are interchangeable. They're basically the same thing. And when you're not breaking the glucose down, the cells are not getting the energy. And so, in a nutshell, your body truthfully is hungry. That's not an excuse for overeating. That's an explanation as to why restoring balance to the system, really strengthening your digestive system, helping your body to break the macronutrients down so that it can actually regulate cell function and use the micronutrients that you're consuming, whether you're taking supplements or just getting it through your food. The other factor about cortisol is actually used as an anti-inflammatory. So there again, going back to oxidative stress, I want to say that we are actually wired to deactivate the oxidative stress. Even though taking high levels of antioxidants do make a difference, we are wired to deactivate the oxidative stress. We are wired to utilize cortisol in a beneficial way because cortisol, besides being a stress hormone, is also used as our own steroid. And we know medical steroids to be anti-inflammatories. And guess what they do? They boost their energy, okay? Which brings me to yet another conversation I was having, actually along the same lines. It was with someone who's living with pretty significant autoimmune challenges right now. And her sister asked me the question when I thought about taking steroids. Now, knowing what I know about this family and their mission to get better, I didn't know what to say. Truthfully, I did what I did just now. I hesitated. I actually couldn't get any words to come out of my mouth. And the reason for that is because I'm not an advocate for bad-mouthing pharmaceuticals. I do believe each one of them has their place. And in some instances, taking steroids, we won't name them here, but taking a corticosteroid does have its benefit. It boosts our energy, and it does help reduce inflammation. At the same time, taking long-term has the opposite result. Yet at the same time, we become dependent upon it, again, because we're getting energy and we feel good, and there is inflammation being eliminated. So it actually takes a step down process with like a lot of psychotropic medications. But becoming dependent on steroids is not really what you want, because truthfully, you make your own. We make our own. And again, this is the purpose for regulating the stress response. It is not an easy process. To give you a one-size-fits-all answer right here, right now, is next to impossible. Like I said, the best suggestions I have for anyone is to really hone in on your digestive system. And it's not very complicated. If you have any number of other symptoms going on, there are certain minerals and there are and nutrients that are beneficial. I don't believe in overdosing on any of them, because all you're going to do, if it's water soluble, it's just going to get flushed from the system. The body will only use what it is recognizing that it needs. And then if it's not recognizing what it needs because some of the cells have been deactivated, the rest is going to go away, no matter how hard we try. I know there's a mindset out there that we can override a lot of these quote-unquote genetic defects that we're seeing on methylation tests. And I'm here to tell you that these methylation tests are just indicators of where your genetics are right now. But your body and your genes are and cells are being activated and inactivated to your advantage. If you're experiencing a lack of ease and comfort, then it's because the system is asking for your help. That's how I want to say it. It's actually asking for your help. And we can talk about, and I mention all the time that we are nature, and we are nature. We are DNA. We are made up of DNA, just like the plants, just like the animals. The difference between us and plants and animals, as you know, is our awareness, our degree of awareness. Yes, there are some plants, plants have an awareness. Yeah, I'm not going to say that they don't, because they recognize when there are threats in the area. Even though there's no words exchanged, they recognize threats, and they will release chemicals that will keep them protected. This is the nature of a plant. Animals do the same thing. No words exchanged. So there is a level of awareness throughout nature. The human species, however, actually has a higher degree of awareness. We have the ability to reason and think things through. And when we recognize this quote-unquote imbalance in our system, we actually have the opportunity to develop a harmonious relationship, an organic relationship with our body, and actually begin to help restore wellness. Now, depending on the degree of symptoms that you're experiencing, and in my world, again, all health conditions are just categories of symptoms. But they are all related because it's all the same chemistry. Like I said, dopamine activates the stress response. Acetylcholine is also a signaling molecule. Estrogen activates and is known to actually modulate dopamine. So, it all plays in on one another, and estrogen will also activate the immune system. And it does this through a genetic complex called nitric oxide synthase, which is where we produce yet another hormone called nitric oxide. However, when there are variations in that very complex, it will alter the way the body is responding. And when we are not in harmony with our body, when we are not in harmony, it's not if our body is in harmony, it's whether we are in harmony with our body. When we're not, we can experience autoimmune disorders, digestive upsets and disorders, neurological disorders, respiratory, cardiovascular. what can result from just that little interaction right there is astounding. And right there, I've just addressed every single degenerative disease that we're experiencing. Pardon me, my nose is itchy. How it manifests in the individual depends on the entire genome. And so, as I said, this was an organic conversation. And the truth is that I really wanted to highlight the idea that we have this opportunity at our disposal. And we get to choose how we want to work with it. And if you choose the conventional model, that's absolutely okay. But if you really want to begin to work in harmony, as I said, begin with the digestive system. And this means more than just the stomach and the bowels. This includes nourishing your liver. You don't need to do a lot of flushes. You certainly don't need to do a lot of detoxes, because one other thing that stress does is it stagnates the lymph. And what I have recognized with people is we have a lot of health conscious people. We have a lot of physically active people, and yet they still struggle. And what I do know is that stress will stagnate the lymph. And the sad thing about it is that, yes, physical activity does help move it. And there are ways, even through yoga, that you can stimulate. And so if you have reached the point of exhaustion, or you're beginning to experience lower levels of energy as a result of whatever you're experiencing, even minor yoga poses will begin to help move that lymph. And the reason that's important is because that's how the body is going to detox itself. If you don't do that, it will push it out through the skin. I guarantee you there's going to be people that will say that's impossible, but the skin is the largest organ. And what do you think a rash is? Whether it's, I'm not just talking about eczema and psoriasis, I'm just talking about your basic rash. We also detox through respiration. This is another reason why physical activity is good, and getting your heart rate up and actually deeper breathing. So here we're back into yoga again. So there's a number of ways to actually begin to move the lymph system, because like I said, it does stagnate. If you really are in a dire situation and that's not possible, there are essential oils that will actually move that, move the lymph system. You may have noticed by now that I'm refraining from offering a lot of essential oil suggestions, unless I know that they will not conflict with medications. That's a very important piece, and I've actually been talking a lot about this, not here, but in other social media, that if you have a physician that tells you that essential oil, there's no credence to essential oils, that there's no, or they don't bring you value, please go find another physician. Don't waste your time, especially if you're including those. There is a way for that to work all together. In fact, they would be very helpful to include, because, as I've mentioned, they act like signaling molecules, just like dopamine and estrogen and acetylcholine. They do not take the place of those, but they are signaling molecules, just like the chemicals in the environment. All right, so I just want to put that out there. A lot of chemicals can act like signaling molecules in the body, which is a good reason to include essential oils. And again, if you're working with someone that says don't use the oils, then you want to find somebody else. And you also want to get yourself paired up with someone who can at least guide you through the use of essential oils, because they will make a huge difference in the way you're helping to restore the way you're working in harmony with your body. Because as I mentioned, when they act as signaling molecules, they do assist the body with improving nutrient uptake. Because from what I've come to discover, due to the way the human genome can adjust itself, okay, it can adjust itself. It doesn't need any help from us. It can do this all on its own. And yes, there are times where just sitting around and letting the body do what it is wired to do can be scary and possibly deadly, meaning, we would pass away from it. This brings me to a whole nother thought process. But if we were to sit back and just let the body do what it organically is wired to do, there would be a possibility that we would die, because that's just the way the organism was headed. And so, like you, I'm not ready to go yet. So we're grasping. And maybe that's too harsh of a word to use, but we are attempting and trying to hold on to our lives, because we are attached to our circumstances. And more importantly, we're attached to the people around us, and we don't want to go until we're ready. I completely understand, appreciate, and respect that as one human being to another. So that on that note, I do completely understand the desire to want to maintain a quality of life. Therefore, working in harmony with the system, we have the gift of being able to maintain life. Because, like I said, if we were to leave nature to its own, a lot of us wouldn't be here. We would have already gone, because nature took its course. And because we have the ability to step in is both our strength and our weakness. And the more we can use the strength of working in harmony, the better, the higher the quality. And I don't promise, 150 years, but I don't promise quantity, but I will promise quality when you work in harmony. And that's the reason why I don't want to give any particular suggestions as a blanket recommendation, because in my opinion, that's irresponsible. Therefore, if you have questions for me and you would like me to give you more specific information, I'm happy to do so. I have my Patreon page, which allows for incremental, memberships, $1 if you just want to contribute to the cause, and you can read about my cause on that site. $3 gets you more specific essential oil information. This is a month. $10 a month gets you very individualized care support. $5 a month puts us in a face group together where we have a little bit more personal interaction. So please check it out. I want to be able to help you, but like I said, I really want to help us work in harmony with our systems, because we've been given the gift to be able to maintain life. And I could almost cry when I think about it. And I just hit that realization while talking with you. So that ability, our awareness, is both our strength and our weakness. And I'm proposing that we have this opportunity right here, right now, to use it as our strength. And I would love to know how I could support you in your endeavors, because my mission is for everyone to be as well as they possibly can, given the choices that they want to make. All right. Thanks for joining me. And let me know if you have any questions. You can contact me, Tammy at Tammy@synergessence.com. I'll have that below. I'll also have my Patreon page listed below. And then there's also, you can contact me on social media. I'm on Instagram at TammyDavis8. As well as on Facebook, listed as Synergessence. So in any case, thank you for joining me, and I really hope you have a beautiful day. Bye now.